Every corny YouTube video requires a scene of the YouTuber dramatically waking up from a nightmare like so. And to make that become a reality, I partnered with Manta Sleep to be the sponsor of today's video. Getting a good night's sleep and feeling rested after doing so are very important. Manta Sleep offers customers top quality sleep masks to aid in viewers like you doing just that. The one they sent me was called the Manta Sleep Sound, which solved an age-old problem. Many folks enjoy listening to music or podcasts or whatever when they're trying to get to sleep, but listening to the phone speakers doesn't cut it, and also having bulky headphones or earbuds in while trying to sleep is certainly not ideal. The Manta Sleep Sound Mask is a Bluetooth device that you can easily pair with your phone or whatever device you want and can listen to music with it while napping or trying to sleep. It's also not super loud or anything, so you can sleep to it without hurting your ears. The mask also creates perfect darkness as well, so if you need to block out light to sleep, this is for you. It also fits well around different head sizes and feels comfortable on your face.
It's perfect!
But Manta has a whole host of different masks available on their website, like the Manta Cool Mask or the Manta Steam Mask, designed for people with different sleeping needs that you can help identify with their sleep quiz. Check them out by going to their website with the link in the description or using my code, Jay's Reviews, to get 10% off in your order. Thanks again to Manta Sleep for sponsoring the video. One of the best projects I ever worked on was the 2003 TMNT retrospective. I covered all 7 seasons of the series and the finale, Turtles Forever, while also giving focus on how the brand came to that point, how it evolved during this era, and the merchandise and video games and all that good stuff. Like I said, absolutely a career highlight, but there was one little thing that left it feeling somewhat unfinished. Despite not being formally connected to the 2003 cartoon, a major piece of TMNT media from the 2000s is of course the only theatrical film released in the 4Kids era, TMNT. An entirely 3D animated film directed by Kevin Munro in his first full feature that debuted in 2007. The reception of this one was pretty mixed, and it seems like fans consider it a somewhat bland but alright TMNT movie with some good bits. I've always found it to be among the best theatrical TMNT movies, but obviously that isn't saying much since I think the original film from 1990, this, and Mutant Mayhem are the only good ones. The rest are all awful in my opinion, including Turtles 2. Never liked that one, even if it's still many steps above the rest. Folks have been asking me to cover this movie for years now, and I'm happy to oblige, since I love the 07 TMNT. Fun fact, this was actually the thing that made me the TMNT fan I am today. My retrospective on the 03 series might have made it seem like it was the 4Kids show, but that was not the case. I was too young to be interested in it when it first came out in 2003, and while I was into its run, it was just one of those things I'd watch if it was on, but wasn't an established fan of. It wasn't until I caught this movie and saw an episode of Fast Forward, which was season 6, that I became more involved in the Turtles overall. And then all my knowledge of the 03 series was just because I researched it a lot afterwards. But yeah, everyone has movies as a kid that you just watched on DVD over and over and over again, and would rewind scenes again and again to catch a cool part. TMNT was one of those for me. It is a quick watch, since it isn't even 90 minutes long, so it was easy to rewatch as well. It also launched alongside a storm of merchandise that I also had. A plethora of action figures from Playmates toys came out, and these were pretty cool since they came out in an era where figures were getting more and more points of articulation while also having fully painted weapons and other accessories. So it was a cool sweet spot for sure. Got a lot of mileage out of those figures in the turtle van from this movie when I was a kid. Don't know whatever ended up happening to all of those, but that's neither here nor there. The movie also got a video game adaptation on just about every console that played games at the time. I say just about because weirdly this game was on everything but the PS3 and the OG Xbox. Obviously Xbox was outdated by then, but the game was on the PS2 and the GameCube and the other next-gen systems. It even got a game on the Game Boy Advance and a physical PC release, but no PS3. I had it for the Xbox 360 and played it and replayed it a lot. Obviously, it's nothing super special if you play it now, just being a pretty bog-standard movie tie-in platformer and beat-em-up, but I enjoyed it when I was a kid, and it's an interesting game historically because it was the first major TMNT console game that was not developed by Konami. They had the license in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, but this game was one of the first to be under the Ubisoft umbrella. But I'm getting mildly off subject. A 3D animated TMNT project had been in the works for a long time. A 3D animated film from John Woo became a thing in 2000, but went into development hell and got scrapped. And one of the pitches for a revival of the Turtles in the early 2000s was a 3D animated series. But none of the networks were interested. That effort later became the 2003 series, which was a traditionally animated series, and thank goodness for that. I don't think the technology was there yet to do a 3D animated TMNT show in the 2000s. That wouldn't come for another decade. And the show that we got was so great, in part thanks to its fight scene animations, so I'm glad things worked out the way they did. But on the big screen, the tech was definitely there for a great 3D animated Turtles film. Kevin Munro felt that an animated movie would make the Turtles be able to do more than they could in live action, and thus have bigger set pieces which would work better for the kind of plot TMNT was going to have. Not to speak ill of live action, I still think Turtles 1 holds up incredibly well. I would know, I just watched it in theaters for the 35th anniversary re-release a few days ago. Of course, I thought the sequel was bad and the third one was an unholy disgrace, but that's neither here nor there. Point is, I think the approach that TMNT decided to take was a good one, and the animation still looks pretty good to this day. But with all that preamble out of the way, I want to run through the movie and identify the things that work about it for me and why they do, and even defend some elements of it that rightfully get flack. I do have some issues with it that we'll get to, though, but I see no better starting point than the beginning. The movie begins with a narration from Lawrence Fishburne, who gives us the rundown of what the Turtles are about, in case you weren't already aware. 4 mutant turtles trained in the sewers of New York City fighting the Foot Clan and the evil Shredder, but then it takes a turn you probably wouldn't expect. We're then taken 3,000 years in the past as an ancient king named Yaudel opened up a portal to another dimension and released 13 monsters who slaughtered his whole army. The portal opening also turned his 4 main generals to stone and made Yaudel immortal while the beasts roamed the earth. Again, that might seem like a really bizarre pivot after the TMNT origin recap, but that's the thing with the Turtles that I've said many times in the past. It always starts as a ninja battle between Turtles and the Foot, but past that point, the Turtles can be about literally anything and everything. No genre is off the table, no threat is too outlandish. They time travel, they go to parallel universes, they go to space, they fight all kinds of enemies, be they street gangs, aliens, or monsters. Some find that to be the part that loses them about the TMNT, but for me, I always thought it was a strength. In this movie's case, you might just find it an odd turn in the first few minutes, especially since once the plot moves ahead to the present day, it's not New York City, but Central America. A village is being preyed upon by goons looking for protection money until the mysterious ghost of the jungle attacks them and returns the stolen goods to the village. April O'Neil was in town for work and decided to check out the legend, and her suspicion was confirmed. The ghost of the jungle was Leonardo. The setup of the movie is one of my favorite parts about it, though. It's quickly established in the opening monologue that this isn't an origin story or a Turtles vs. Shredder movie. The Shredder's long defeated. This movie takes place years after the usual status quo of the TMNT. The Turtles are about 19 or so in this, and they've all grown apart. Splinter sent Leo to Central America for training, and in the meantime, the family has become a shell of its former self. April informs Leo that Donatello is now an IT tech support guy.
No, I'm not playing hard to get. I'm telling you, sir, it's not that kind of phone line.
And Michelangelo is in the children's entertainment business.
Hey, black and blue clashes with green, dude! Hey!
While Raphael's activities are a mystery because he sleeps all day. In reality, Raph's now a masked vigilante called the Night Watcher. April points out that Leo doesn't even write home anymore, and he claims that the people of these villages need him more than his brothers do, and disappears again. I just find the setup of this movie to be compelling and creative. It would have been so easy to play it safe and do a movie where Shredder comes back again and fights the heroes, but this one wanted to do something different and ask the question, what happens after that? After their main enemy is gone and years have gone by, what does that do to the team? I'm not going to say the villain plot we got in exchange for the familiar faces is a total home run, but I commend the creativity is all. This scene with April also serves as the intro to each turtle where we see the personalities and voices. This movie had a lot of stars in it. Like I already mentioned, Lawrence Fishburne did the opening monologue, but then Patrick Stewart plays Max Winters, Chris Evans as Casey Jones, and Mako as Master Splinter. This being one of his last film credits as the movie was released after he passed away. But then what I really appreciate about this movie is that despite the casting department getting a lot of big names to do many of the characters, the Turtles were all voiced by actors who are more established in the animation world. Like Leonardo being voiced by James Arnold Taylor, famous for playing Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Clone Wars and being the voice of Johnny Test. My favorite role of his was Ratchet from Ratchet & Clank in the second game and onwards. He plays a really grounded and serious Leo, and I like it a lot. Raphael was played by Nolan North, who's been in a lot of animated projects, like playing Deadpool in virtually everything Deadpool appears in, and he was also Nathan Drake in the Uncharted games and so many other things. And he's also a fantastic Raph with the accent and the attitude down to a T. Donatello was voiced by Mitchell Whitfield, who is more of a screen actor than a voice actor, being a character in My Cousin Vinny and Friends. But then Michelangelo was voiced by Mikey Kelly, who has also been in a bunch of animated projects, and fun fact, he was the voice of Ratchet in the first Ratchet & Clank game. So I thought that was a fun coincidence that both voices of Ratchet were in this movie as different Ninja Turtles. But anyway, the movie's plot is kicked off because April and Casey are working on recovering ancient statues for a billionaire named Max Winters. Winters is seemingly the antagonist as he's looking for the ancient 13 beasts and hires what's left of the Foot, led by Karai, to help him find them, while the Turtles deal with their not being close anymore in their own way, but are forced back together when Leo returns, affected by April telling him how the group fell apart without him, and he's eager to get things back on track. How much you enjoy this movie is really going to depend on who your favorite turtle is. If you love Leo, you might find this movie to be a misfire. Leo is my favorite turtle and always has been. I think the movie is really good for reasons I'll explain, but if you're a fan of Donnie or Mikey, you'll probably not like this one for reasons I'll also get into. But this TMNT is absolutely a Raphael movie. He's the main character of the story, you see it from his perspective, and he has the major arc throughout. Raph being the POV character is used to explore the themes of families falling apart and miscommunication. Like I've already said, the basis of this movie is that the turtles are older and not as close as they used to be. Where I think the movie really gets right about Raph is how emotional he is to a fault. He's a character who's easy to boil down as angry, but the best stories about him make him that way because he doesn't know how else to express his really strong feelings. Raph is a guy who has a deep sense of justice about him and carries the weight of the world on his shoulders, and in this movie they got that nailed down, and they also get right that Raph feels like the odd turtle out and that nobody really gets him. First, just because he doesn't want to tell anyone he's the Night Watcher, but also just because he's treated like the bad turtle and acts as if. You can see it in his design too. The other three turtles are brighter green shades, but Raph is this desaturated color, showing physically that he's the odd man out of the group, but it's also shown in how he behaves and engages with people.
Oh, good morning, my sons.
Good morning, Sensei.
What's up?
So Splinter sent Leo away for training, and Raph, who loves his family dearly, was sad about Leo leaving. And since it's established in the movie that Leo stopped writing letters a while ago, so Raph takes that as the ultimate betrayal. That Leo has abandoned the cause of fighting New York City crime, and so Raph took it upon himself to do it. And worse, he feels like Leo has abandoned the family, and that makes him really mad. The whole plot in general is about how Raphael feels about leadership. Leo gets to roam free for a year and then comes back and then acts like Raph should just follow him around now? Outrageous, he thinks.
You're gonna stand here and quote a rulebook to me that you ain't been following for a year?
Look, Raph, if you've got something you want to get off your shell, now's the time. But I'm not gonna stand here and debate Splinter's direct orders with you.
Being older, he naturally wants to break out on his own and call his own shots, even if he's reckless or perhaps not ready to do so. Leo, who has been assigned the leader role his whole life, still tries to maintain the order of things, which pisses off the older Raph. If you're a Leo fan and feel like he was treated like an antagonist in this movie, I get that criticism, but I do think it's a natural byproduct of Raph being the focus character. If you have a movie about Raphael trying to be his own man, Leo is inevitably going to be the antagonist of the story, but I understand him nevertheless. Although he can be a bit dense. I mean, Leo somehow doesn't know that Raph is the Night Watcher while fighting him. Even Casey was just like,
Wasn't that hard, man. You know, you look like a big metal turtle.
but Leo is fighting a guy roughly his size, with 3 fingers on each hand and a giant shell on his back, and he doesn't realize it's Raph until the mask comes off. But anyway, despite some of the issues in the writing, I totally get where Leo's coming from in this. Similar to the 2003 incarnation, Leo here is a character motivated by guilt and perfectionism. The fate of his family has always been put in his hands, so when he hears the family has kind of fallen apart lately without him, he feels like it's his fault and returns home with the mission to save the family and even apologizes to Splinter for failing the second he walks through the door. So from his perspective, he's trying to do the right thing, but in Raph's, Leo is being an obnoxious hardcase. For Leo, it's frustrating since you want everyone to be okay, but Raph just keeps going rogue and the other two will just follow him around when he does it. Leo has to follow them all to make sure everyone gets out okay, and then is the one who gets in trouble for it.
You've been back for 5 minutes and now you're schooling us on your master plan.
Oh, okay, so this is my fault now, huh, Raph? I'm the only one that has to be responsible?
Hey, you're the trained master, not me.
But Master Splinter, how can I be expected to
There
do so
are
when Raph...
no excuses when you are the leader, my student.
And then another underrated element of Leo's motivations here come from the scene before he fights Raph. It's something I didn't notice until a recent viewing that I thought added a lot to the story. When Leo is telling the Night Watcher that he can't change the world like this, we hear Raph in his head being like, is he kidding? He's lecturing me. But you can faintly hear Leo in the background saying, this road you're on is a dead end. Trust me, I tried. It never gets brought up past the opening that Leo was the ghost of the jungle, but it shows the two both have a strong sense of justice and basically went about it the same way. But Leo doesn't talk about it because he views that time as a flop because the result of it was his family falling apart. So he doesn't take pride in his vigilante activities and looks down upon the Night Watcher as a result. Perhaps chases him down as a form of projection, going after the symbol of his own perceived failure, even though Splinter reassured him when he came back that he did good things and that the training was successful. I just find the conflict between Leo and Raph really convincing. They love each other in an awkward kind of way where they're family, but have so much built-up resentment towards each other for a variety of reasons that explode in the fight scene. One of which being that, like I said, Raph is really emotional and thinks that Splinter likes Leo more than him.
You are so smug! You know that? You think the world revolves around you, don't you? That we couldn't possibly survive without the mighty and powerful Leonardo to guide us through our problems, huh?
I think it was relatively out of character for Leo to say he was better than Raph, but again, when the resentment pipe builds up over a long time, it bursts with people saying things they didn't really mean. I think that's what happened here. The whole sequence is the highlight of the movie. The one the whole thing revolves around. The first 2 acts are spent setting up this conflict, so the fight had to be good to make the third act feel rewarding. The animation and lighting in this movie doesn't always look super amazing or anything, but they knew they needed to nail this sequence, so Leo chasing Raph through the streets and the roofs looks awesome, and then the fight on the roof with the rain is really cinematic and everything you'd want of a Leo versus Raph fight. I think Raph wins because he was actually trying to fight Leo for real, when Leo was trying to just give Raph what he wanted. Not to say that he let him win, but is just more skilled than Raph in general, and lost because Raph was seriously trying to fight. But then the third act begins when Leo gets captured by the villains and Raph realizes how much he's fucked up because it's his brother, and this petty conflict has completely gotten in the way of what's actually happening. Which is all great stuff, though the movie does have issues. The villain plot, for example, isn't that interesting. The twist is that Winters is capturing the monsters and is releasing a beam into the sky because that will send the monsters home and undo his immortality. So he's actually trying to save the day. I said a long time ago that immortal characters are either evil psychopaths or depressed people with regret because we aren't meant to live forever. Winters is that second one. Early in the story he's set up as the villain, but the reason he's amassed such an empire over the centuries is so he can have the resources to send the beasts back to where they belong and undo the curse. But the stone generals who were only just brought back haven't lived long enough to know how bad immortality is and still want to rule the world like they used to and turn on Winters. The point is that there are two families who are in ruin from personal conflict, and the heroes resolve theirs and the villains don't. That's fine, however the issue is that the stones aren't really great villains. Aguila is the only one whose name I can even remember. They have no personality or motivations besides evil, which gets the job done in an 80-minute animated movie, but it does mean that any depth the story was trying to get out of them isn't going to land because they have no depth whatsoever. 3 of them are basically cannon fodder for the final fight between the turtles and the stones. But then another issue I feel is the movie's biggest problem. That the other 2 turtles have nothing to do in this story. This is a movie where a significant portion of the plot is devoted to Leo and Raph bickering and Raph getting into trouble and Leo and Raph resolving it and everyone being happy at the end. Yeah, that's great, except I'm sure Donnie and Mikey fans were a little sick of that since that was also a significant part of the plot of Turtles 1 and 2. Mikey got a spine-chillingly cringe arc in Turtles 3 about wanting to stay in the past, but besides that, the other Turtles had not gotten much screen time in the films. But at least Turtles 1 gave Donnie and Mikey that scene in the sewer where they talk about what would happen if Master Splinter was gone, which is then paid off later in the movie when they're at the fireside scene. I'm just saying it's a general Turtles trope for those 2 to have less screen time. The 2012 series even made a gag where a whole episode is about how Leo and Raph are the A team and Donnie and Mikey are the B team, where they get to prove themselves by the end. But in this movie, Don is just the exposition smart guy as usual, and Mikey just makes jokes. Every commercial for this movie was also obsessed with this one gag. It played in every single one.
It looked like your mom, dude. Yeah, that would make her your mom too, doofus.
They have no role in the story otherwise and have nothing to say about the conflicts in the family once Leo comes back, which doesn't really feel that natural, unlike the conflict between the A-Team, which does feel real and relatable for anyone from a big family. But hell, Casey and April have more of a role and an arc in this movie than the other 2 turtles. April's work for Winters being the inciting incident of the story, both for the villain plot and for Leo's return, and then Casey bounces off of Raph throughout the whole movie, while Casey and April work throughout their relationship issues and resolve them by the end of the movie too. Maybe if the thing was 10 minutes longer, it could have given the other turtles more screen time, but regardless, I still really like the finale of the movie. The turtles and Splinter fighting together to save the world, and the music is all epic and stuff, and they cut between each turtle fighting and Splinter, and before the turtles kick the stones into the portal, it's an enjoyable climax. Though I must say, one thing I can never unhear when I watch this scene is how I swear Raph's line pre-fight sounds like it's cut off or something. Like, listen to it.
Hate to rain on your parade, pal, but we thought we'd even the odds.
If he said, but we thought we'd even the odds, that would sound normal, but it's like he said, I thought we'd even the odds a little. But then the audio editors cut that sentence off at the end, so it sounds like this.
But we thought we'd even the odds.
I don't have any proof of that, but that's what it sounds like to me. Good luck unhearing that next time you ever feel the need to watch the movie. But after the day is saved, the stones are destroyed, the monsters are gone, and Winters has a natural death. And then Raph retires the Night Watcher for good in Splinter's trophy room. But this trophy room is actually one of the more interesting things in the film, because it's related to the question that has existed ever since the movie came out. Is TMNT a sequel to the live-action Turtles trilogy? Nothing in the movie would really give off that vibe while watching. These turtles are totally different in appearance and voices and all that, and no references are made to the originals throughout the story. Plus, the Foot Clan are actual ninjas led by Karai, not teenagers recruited off the streets like Turtles 1. April in this is also a world-traveling expert on ancient artifacts, not a news reporter like the trilogy. This puts her more in line with the 2003 incarnation, but this movie doesn't really work with that universe either. Leo already did the travel and train thing in that series, so it would make that plotline redundant. And also, Turtles Forever showed that the 07 movie is a separate universe from the 03 universe anyway, so that's out. Turtles Forever also showed the 07 Turtles were a separate universe from the live-action trilogy. Peter Laird, one of the co-creators of the Turtles, even said this was not Turtles 4, but its own thing. However, this trophy room says otherwise. In it, we can see the Shredder's helmet from Turtles 1, a can of ooze, likely from Turtles 2, and the Time Scepter from Turtles 3. What I was going to say was that it was hard to tell about that ooze canister because in most TMNT incarnations, the ooze comes from a company called TCRI, but then in Turtles 2, the name of it was TGRI. You can't make out what it says in this canister here. So I decided to watch the director's commentary of this scene, and Kevin Monroe said it was intentional, that the ooze canister is cut at just the right angle for you to not be able to tell if that's a C or a G. The trophy room is also filled with things from the trilogy, but also other obscure TMNT references. He wanted it to be ambiguous what the canon of this movie was. Years later, he said it was the intention in his mind for this to be the sequel to those movies, and he wrote the thing, so I trust him, but Turtles Forever also shows these two as separate worlds. If you want to know how I think of it, it's like this. I think that in the world of TMNT, something akin to the trilogy happened. You know, the Turtles meet April and Casey and fight Shredder. You know, maybe Shredder comes back as a super mutant later, and then the Turtles have a time-traveling adventure in ancient Japan, and then years later this movie happens. Like, the exact events depicted on the screen in the original trilogy aren't one-to-one canon with TMNT, but something like those movies happened in the backstory of this movie, which accounts for details that don't line up 100%. I have to say, the time-traveling adventure in this universe was probably a lot cooler than the one we got on screen, that's for sure. But before I get too lost in talking about TMNT canon, I'm going to wrap it up. My overall thoughts on the movie are, I really enjoy coming back to this one every now and again. Like I said earlier, it's one of my favorite childhood movies, and I like quoting lines from it sometimes. Rewatching it as an adult has moments and scenes I still really like as a Turtles fan and a good media enjoyer. With its short runtime, it's also easy to revisit too. It's not like a big investment of time. It tells the story quickly and effectively and looks really good and has great moments, and is a top-tier TMNT movie in my opinion. I still will say TMNT 1 is the definitive Turtles film as of writing this, since that's a more normal TMNT story with the origin and the Shredder and all that, but this movie is certainly a favorite of mine. Though it being watchable at all makes it one of the best TMNT movies by default, since Turtles 3 and the Bay movies are unwatchable horror shows, and I thought Turtles 2 was also really bad. TMNT never got a sequel, even though there were plans for it. Mikey was even going to be the focus character of it, and Shredder was teased to return at the end of the movie, but nothing ever came of that. TMNT was a decent success, earning almost $100 million at the box office with a modest budget of $35 million, and so the movie had a big impact on 2000s Turtles stuff. I went into this in the Back to the Sewer video, where the whole aesthetic of the 2003 series was changed in the last season to match the visuals of this movie, even if there was no lore connection between the two. But ultimately, it might have gotten a sequel if it was released like 2 years earlier. The reason it didn't get a sequel wasn't because it was bad, it was because of the fact that it was released when it was. By 2007, the 2000s era of Turtles was on its way out. 4Kids was bleeding money and was going to end soon, as I went into in the 03 retrospective. The animation studio behind this movie also went bankrupt after the release of the Astro Boy movie 2 years after TMNT. That movie was such a box office bomb that the studio had to go bankrupt. But by the time a sequel for this could be pitched, we were clearly in the wind-down phase of the 2000s era as 4Kids was going up in flames and Peter Laird officially was getting ready to sign over the rights to the Turtles in their entirety to Viacom, ushering in the brand's second hiatus prior to the Nick era starting in 2012. So because of that, TMNT is just a standalone movie now, one that I think is fun to watch. Or you could look at it as a nice epilogue to the original trilogy. That depends on how you look at it. And that's more than enough for me. Not everything needs to go on forever. I thought it was a fun movie for what it was, and I'll always enjoy going back to it. But yeah, that's about all I have to say on that. I think the movie's good. Without the nostalgia or being a Turtles fan, it certainly isn't breaking the bank or doing anything super new or exciting on its own, but it's fun. And I think that's good enough. I'm glad to have covered it to say I touched upon everything 2000s Turtle related. But that's about all the time we have for today, so I'll close by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.